Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 7, and we are now discussing the fourth module. Okay, and in this module, we are going to discuss about stakeholder and network, and network will be discussed next week. Okay, and you may have received the you may have seen the broadcast announcement that shows you that every second session in that week we'll discuss the assessment. So please feel free to jump in and bring your questions, inquiries, and that session may not be recorded. Okay. Right, so in this topic we are going to discuss about stakeholder management, which is quite critical for us as a manager. Okay, remember one of the key skills that we need to have as a manager is to communicate with the others. All right, and in the stakeholder management, it is communication plays a critical role to help us managing the stakeholders. Okay, so let's look at the concept. What is a stakeholder? Well, simply defined, stakeholder is actually the stakeholders are people or groups or any other parties like organizations with a vested interest in the success of the project as well as in the failure of the project. Okay, therefore, if you look at that, now we look at we use the term project as well in here, right? And it is also important for us to understand that in our role as a manager, we may be involved in managing projects, okay, which is basically a set of activities that have goals and specific time frame. Therefore, they are normally quite they are normally temporary. Okay, let's say we may need to manage moving the office, for instance. Okay, in doing so, we need to get engaged with the stakeholders. Okay, or we may need to manage a competition event with the other team, for instance, in our organization. Okay, therefore, if you look at that, stakeholders basically consist of individuals, okay, within the organization or beyond the organization, group of people, or the other organization, such as our competitors, okay, the government, okay, and they may or may not gain benefits from us. Okay, and again, they affect, okay, and they affect the outcome of our project. Okay, they affect the outcome of the project that we are managing. Okay, okay. Since they affect the outcome, we need to carefully manage the stakeholders. Okay, and the engagement of the stakeholders has become an important part for our success as a manager in the organization. Okay, and you can also recall the social capital theory that we discussed in presentation 1, where as part of social science, management also can also be analyzed or can also be viewed from social theory such as social capital theory. Okay, where we basically have the asset through the relationship. Okay, in other words, social capital actually suggests that the assets embedded in the relationship. Okay, so our skills in managing the stakeholders actually become the assets for the organization as well as our own asset personally. Okay, some managers are quite good actually in terms of managing stakeholders. Some other managers may view managing the stakeholders, are part of day-to-day job. Okay, but again, as we discussed briefly, the managing the stakeholders also plays an important role in the success of our role. Okay. All right. Okay. Now let's identify the stakeholders. Who are they? Well, they can be the board members. That can be the executive management, senior or functional managers. Okay, staff, the other staff from different departments. Okay, the third-party providers, okay, external consultants. Okay? The governments, local governments. Okay, and there are products as well, such as the legislation or regulation, because the government generates or produces the regulation for us to interact in our operation. Okay, the contracting businesses and also the industry associations. Okay, so there are some examples of stakeholders. Okay? Now, if we look at that, we can actually classify the stakeholders based on primary and secondary stakeholders. Okay, this actually is related to how close they are in our projects, okay, or how important they are in our project, okay. So if you are if you're managing a project, obviously we need to manage the customers, okay, the primary contractors, right, such as the other staff or the external agencies that work with us closely, the top management, okay? So they are part of the primary stakeholders, right? And we also need to manage the secondary stakeholders. That includes the other parties that are not as close as the primary, not as critical as the primary, but they can also affect, okay? They can also affect the outcome of the projects, okay, such as the government agencies or the unions, all right? So that's based on primary and secondary stakeholders. And the next one is based on where they work, if you like, or based on which organization that they belong to, okay? We can group them into internal and external stakeholders, okay? The internal stakeholders may include us, the project managers, the project sponsors, okay, the project team. Okay, the project team in here basically includes the other people as well from different departments. Okay, the top management, they are part of the internal stakeholders as well, because they have strong vested interest in the success or failure of the project that we perform. Okay, and aside from that, we also need to manage the external stakeholders, okay, such as the customers, the agencies, the external agencies such as advertising agencies if you work in marketing industry, okay, the unions, the government agencies, okay, the competition, if you like, competitors, okay, your oppositions. If we are talking about the sport games, for instance, there are the external stakeholders as well that we need to manage, that we need to monitor how good they are in managing themselves, okay? All right. And experts also suggest what they call as the stakeholder matrix, okay, where it is actually helping us to manage the engagement of the stakeholders, okay? So it is a document that we maintain and regularly review, okay, to understand the stakeholders' level of interest and also power, okay, to maintain that. This document helps us to manage the engagement of the stakeholders, okay. The matrix actually consists of this information, the name of the stakeholders, okay, and their functional role, okay, the contact details, the primary or secondary, whether they are internal or external stakeholders, okay, and what they want from the project. Okay, that shows their interest in the project. Okay, remember, the stakeholders becomes very critical for to us because of their interest and also their power. Okay, the current perceptions and knowledge about the project and the desired perceptions that we expect from the stakeholder and their knowledge, okay? And the unwritten rules as well. Okay, and of course the other one is the organizational currencies. Now, organizational currencies basically help us to understand the exchange process. Okay, if we go back to the social theory, we live in the world of exchange, right? So we exchange information with the other people, we exchange knowledge with the other people, okay? We exchange the other things with other people, okay? Kind of, if we receive help from someone, okay, actually that creates an obligation for us to do something reciprocally, okay, to the other person. Okay, this is actually related back to the social capital theory that we just discussed before, right? So this is the foundation of the relationship. Okay, the same thing. If we do something to the other people in the organization, we actually have created kind of obligation from the other to the other people that they need to do to us. Okay, so that's the currencies. Okay, now the currencies in here is something that you need to find out in managing the stakeholders. What the currencies are. Is that a matter of helping, or is that matter of social chat, for instance? Is that a matter of I help you, help me, or the other thing? Okay. Right, now, if we zoom into the currencies further, okay, we can actually find out several types of currencies, such as task related. I do this task for you, then I create obligation for you to do certain tasks for me. Okay, or position related. Okay, so I do this for you because of your position, and the same token, you also need to do something because of your position related to me. Okay, inspiration related, which is basically about who inspires what, and that becomes the currency in the relationship. Okay, and the next one is the relationship related, which is more into the social relationship situation where we have we create in quote unquote obligation, or we have an obligation because of the social relationship in the social relationship context. Okay, or at a more personal level, beyond the deeper than just the social relationship, it is at personal related. Okay, so if we are close to someone, that means we actually create an obligation one to another. So kind of creating consensus with this person, where if we agree to exchange certain things with this person. Okay. All right. So that's the currency, types of currency in terms of driving the exchange process with the other stakeholders. Right, and the next one is actually consult the key stakeholders. Okay, in terms of consult the key stakeholders, we actually look at several stakeholders, such as the senior management teams. We consult with them. Okay, the business partner or financiers, customers. The customers, we do a consultation with the customers, the stakeholders, the other staff, and of course the technical advisors or technical experts that have the knowledge and skills in their field that we need to engage as well when it comes to consultation with the stakeholders. Okay. Right. Now, the other thing I'd like to highlight is the mapping the stakeholder power. Okay, here we have two types of power when it comes to managing the stakeholders. That in terms of positive power, they actually support us, using their power to support us in managing the project. Okay, so they may run political interference for the project manager for us in this instance. Okay, or endorse the decision-making procedure. Okay, or they may also support us in terms of changing the control process. Okay, or they may model the appropriate behaviors to support us. Okay, and they may also help us supporting the other team members. Okay, or they escalate appropriate issues to help us performing the projects. Okay, or undertaking the project. Okay. And respond promptly to all communication requests. Okay, so when we need something, they respond promptly. Okay, hey, this is it. Okay, here you are. Yeah, and approach all performance variations in a collaborative manner. Okay, so if you have issues in, let's say, if you have, if you're running short in terms of certain performance metrics, these people are available for us to help us managing the performance. Okay, to turn around the shortfall. Okay. And the next one is the negative power, which is basically used by the stakeholders to oppose what we do, or that's basically becoming the a disruption for us. Okay, so they may do short-circuiting to the agreed procedure, so they shortcut that to the agreed procedure, or they bully the other stakeholders, right? Or they may create the other disruption. Okay? And in certain situations, they may circumnavigating change control process. Okay? Or they may be being critical or judgmental to what we do. Okay? Not attending the meetings. Okay? So they ignore us. We invite them to the meeting, but they ignore, for instance. Okay? And undermine the project manager's authority. And they may also have a track record for raising issues and keep complaining. Okay? That basically becomes a disruption to the project management. Okay, or they may complete the work poorly. Okay, or ignore the instructions and directions that we provide to the team members. Okay, or not following through on information requests. We request the information, but these people do not respond to it promptly. Okay, right. Now, of course, we know the positive and negative power. So from project perspective, and if we become the project member, then we need to understand this wisely in terms of supporting, showing our support to the projects. Okay, that goes back to the currency as well. Okay, so if we show support to our friends when they become the project manager, then we, at the same token, we also expect the same thing from the other people. Okay. All right, and we can also map the power of the stakeholders. Okay, based on no measured power, we can score them or rate them based on 1 to 5, basically. Okay, 1 being quite low and 5 being quite strong in terms of the stakeholder power. Okay, so you can put the names down in terms of their power as the stakeholder of the project. Okay, whether they are extremely strong or not, or they are no measured power. That means they are not that powerful, but we need to still map them. Okay, because although they are not powerful, but at some point of time they may create the alignment with their people, and that becomes stronger in terms of voicing their concerns. Okay. Right. The other thing that we also need to manage is the interest. Okay. Aside from the power, we also need to manage their interest. Remember, the stakeholders affect the outcome of the project, whether it will be a success or a failure. Okay. So two things that we need to be aware of: their power and also the interest. Okay. Again, like power, we can also map them based on positive and negative interest. Okay? Positive interest includes adhering to new operating procedure, attending training workshop. Okay, so they show their interest in it, demonstrate the feasibility and involvement. Okay, contribute with ideas and feedback, and reading the handover documentation if they need to. If we just step up to that role, promote the change to the other stakeholders, because in management, like project management, for instance, there is a likelihood that we are involved in making changes. Okay? And demonstrate the appropriate change agent behavior, so they help us promoting it. Okay, they help us communicating it. Okay, and in terms of negative interest, there are a few examples here, like passivity, for instance. They are passive. Okay, they are not supporting us. Okay, public apathy and indifference. Okay, malicious compliance, constant challenging and questioning. Okay, similar to the negative power, basically. Outright non-compliance. Okay, and conscious activity leading to damage and disruption. So that shows that they have negative interest. They're interested. Okay, I think we need to also be clear here. They're interested, but in a negative way. Okay? Focal disrespectful resistance, okay, or secretly fueling and promoting dissent. Okay, so that's basically mapping the interests of the stakeholders. And again, we can also map them based on. We can also rate them from 1 to 5. Okay, and based on this, we can put the stakeholders based on the power and interest, high and low. Okay, whether they are. This is basically suggesting us the strategy. Okay, whether we need to manage closely because they have high power and high interest. Okay. Or on the opposite side, we can do minimal efforts because the interest is low, their power is also low. Yeah, we keep minimal efforts. Okay, either once a month of communication, brief updates, and so on and so forth. Okay, and on the opposite side, we have the high power but low interest stakeholders. We need to keep them satisfied. Okay, and on the other side, we have high interest of stakeholders, but they are low in terms of power. We need to keep them informed, so they are all engaged with our project. Okay. Now, in terms of plan, the stakeholder management, you can also map the stakeholders based on the names, who they are. So this becomes our stakeholder register, if you like, who the stakeholders are, their responsibilities, the information that they expect from us, the format, the frequency of information, and who are they. Okay. You may recall that in presentation 3, we discussed about the stakeholder continuum, where they are. They may be the opposer, fence-sitter, right? They just watch, they just observe, or the promoter. Okay, that becomes the positive supporter of our project. Okay. And of course, if you also recall that presentation, we can map them based on the whether they are aware or not. If this is C, means the current position, and we expect them to be supportive. D, the desired position. Okay, so if they are unaware, we expect them to be supportive to us, and if they are neutral, we expect them to be supportive. And if they are already supportive, we expect them to stay supportive to us. Okay, all right. So that's basically the stakeholder management. Okay, and again, as a brief summary, stakeholders contribute to the success and failure actually of our project management. So we need to build engagement with the stakeholders based on the interest and power and their position on our project. Okay, so that's basically the stakeholder management. Okay,